The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is Jamie Shanks at Sales for Life, and really excited to bring a company that has incredible sales acumen, sales and marketing expertise. I'm here to introduce Ben Sims. Ben, give a moment, give the team an idea who you are and what Market Source is, because this is going to be a great webinar.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited about this as well, Jamie. So Market Source, we are a B2B sales outsourcing solution. What we do is we deploy sales teams that augment and segment what you're already doing with the goal of either gaining new customers, launching new products, growing your market share, optimizing your sales expense, or maximizing your mature products. Now, we do this with a robust recruiting engine. So we're going to talk about recruiting today and to find the right people. Then we develop a proprietary sales process, and then we install best-in-class technology stack to make our producers successful. I oversee delivery and services for our current and existing clients and programs. So that includes programs that support our clients with inside sales teams, outside sales teams, direct or indirect sales, sales support, and we cover the entire sales cycle. Like we have teams that do lead gen and fill up the top of the funnel. We have teams that do negotiating and closing, and then we have teams that manage or develop your current accounts.
So fantastic. So we started working a year ago with Market Source, and a lot of their customers, such as retailers, incredible sales insights that they bring. And of course, we're injecting the digital sales, top of the funnel, business development best practices. So here's the point of today's webinar. The point of today's webinar is that after all the gajillion sellers that Ben and his team deal with every day, they've distilled it down to 5 competencies that you're either going to want to hire for, you're going to want to onboard for, or you are going to want to get the right people on and off the bus based on these competencies. So here's how we're going to run today. Ben's going to talk to you about the science of the competencies. I'm going to tell you stories of real sellers from our real customer base around the world that I've met that actually exude these skills. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off our webcams. Just wanted to introduce ourselves, and let's get right into it. Ben, you're the driver. I'll be John Madden running color commentary.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. I would argue today that having an amazing talent on your sales team is probably more important now than ever before. Whether it's inside sales, outside sales, your channel partners, there is a war for talent right now. We all know that unemployment rates are at historical lows, so it's a job seeker's market. And we also know that all sales teams can stack rank and recognize that your A players tend to significantly outperform the rest. But do we know why? Maybe intuitively we do, but how about specifically why? Knowing what makes your A players different allows you to focus on coaching on specific topics for the rest of the team, but it also impacts your hiring and what you should look for. And I find we work with hundreds and dozens, hundreds of sales managers, and a lot of times when I ask them what specifically are you looking for, they don't really have concrete answers. So now, Jamie, a lot of companies don't have the benefit that Market Source has. We have 150 in-house recruiters here. So we have an engine that can go find talent, and most companies I work with don't have that luxury. And I've also seen a lot of companies, they'll require industry experience when hiring sales reps, especially in technology or telecom, SaaS, industrial companies. A lot of times they want those people that already come in, they've worked in the industry, because they think that there's a quicker ramp, or they have a Rolodex of potential clients. But those sales reps are going to go through that Rolodex. And I'm aging myself here by using the term Rolodex. I get that. But they'll go through it in like 6 months. So what we have found is we've taken some of those companies and challenged them on the industry experience requirement. And we found that if we focus on identifying sales core competencies, find people that are great at sales skills instead of putting a round peg in a square hole. And these sales skills can come from all walks of life. I've had former school teachers become A players. And if you teach them the industry or the product knowledge, you're actually going to get results faster. So after speaking and surveying hundreds of sales managers throughout my entire career, I believe we've identified 5 core competencies of your A players. And so we're going to go through each 5, and then we're also going to talk about what are those characteristics, and then of course, how do you find those characteristics, or how do you coach to those characteristics? So the first one I want to bring up, if I can, there we go. One is a results-driven person. So you see the attributes there, right, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's funny as you're talking, this reminds me so much. If you haven't read the book called Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge, he, just as Ben describes, he isolates sales competencies and recognizes that you must discount long-term product acumen. Ben, I thought you hit the nail on the head when you said, hey, you bring in people because they have a Rolodex or they're experienced in your industry, but product acumen is only going to get you so far. So fantastic, Ben. You continue going. Right on.
That's great. I appreciate it. So in addition to the attributes, which everybody here can read for themselves, I would add a little more context in that a results-driven sales professional, what you're going to find they do is they define a long-term outcome. But then what they do is they set immediate milestones, and they measure their progress toward the milestones to reach the long term. So it's not just saying, what do I want to accomplish at the end of this year or even in my career, and then setting some midterm goals and measuring against those attributes and toward those objectives. And a lot of times I find that sales reps will schedule or maybe put some goals down and then kind of forget about them. Not A players. A players don't do that. They also have a high sense of urgency to achieve their goals. You've seen this. You hire an A player, or an A player takes on a new region or assignment, and they don't make the excuse like, yeah, I'll hit my number after I ramp 3 months from now. They're hungry and ready to hit numbers now. So they have a very high sense of urgency. So in order to find these people, if you're recruiting, here's an interview question, but really what I want to identify, one of the interviews that I go after is, in the answer to this question, I want to know, have they been award winners? I ask them, where did they rank on their previous team? Because everybody's 120% of goal on their resume, but where did you rank? If you were on a team of 5, 10, 50, were you number 1, number 2, number 3? You're going to find that the results-driven people are proud of the fact that they were number 1. They're proud of the fact that they went to Cancun and earned whatever club award that you have. And winners tend to be winners again. So that's how I try to identify results-driven people. How have you found results-driven people? Or do you have some examples?
Well, yeah. So, and as you flip the next, that's exactly it. So the way I see this is, maybe it's because I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for, frankly, since I was about 16 years old. So the reality is I actually tend to gravitate towards, and I believe a results-driven person is like an intrapreneur. This is an individual that can understand how they have to set business outcomes, sales objectives, down to activities, written down like a business plan. And it has to be very forward and structured thinking. And so personally, as you were describing this, I was thinking, and I love the team at SAS. So the team at SAS has a breakout division idea. So now think of an entrepreneurial environment within a SAS organization at Ideas, and Jeff Roark exudes results driven. Imagine if you've been given a territory or you've been given a vertical and you need to drive massive results. It's about being able to build a structured plan. So what Jeff was able to do, on the right-hand side, you see a diagram, what we call the sphere of influence. And this is how you map. If I'm going to target a geographic area or a vertical, instead of just focusing on opening up the phone book and calling A through Z on every account in a territory or vertical, what I'm going to do is use the social proximity and the sphere of influence of relationships of the SAS Institute parent company to be able to identify, have there been job changes, as an example, from one customer of ours that has moved into a logo into my territory that I didn't know about, that I could now penetrate? Are there referral networks within the SaaS Institute that I could broker to be able to get into an account within my territory or vertical? It's thinking of your business like it's a business. And so that's how I see a results driver. Is they take on the business as if it was their own business.
That's amazing. Yeah. And they have a global view to the entire company they work for, but they also take ownership of their part of that global view. And that's an amazing story. That's very good. All right. Moving on to what we've identified as the second core competency, and that is influential skills. A players, your best sales professionals have this, and they have it in a contagious, energetic way. However, I want to add a little more to that. Not all influence is intentional. It's not always intentional. The A players feel like they're always on stage. They're always on, and therefore the influence becomes contagious. Now, I love the last bullet there about communicating what I call earned trust. You can't be influential unless you've earned the trust. And how do you do that? You're open, you're honest, and you're always fair. Those are skill sets that someone with influential skills has. But yet, influential sales reps who are your A players, they adjust their style to fit the situation while being influential. There's a great quote here, Jamie, I have from President Dwight Eisenhower. We were speaking to presidents off camera, actually, before this, so here's one for you. He said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he or she want to do it. That's a great influencer, in my opinion.
I love it.
Do you have an example?
Well, the example that I'm going to use is, and I want you to think about how you truly become the law of reciprocity, or Gary Vaynerchuk would call it jab, 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 right hook. Okay, so I want you to meet Priscilla. So globally around the world, we built a digital selling training program for all Microsoft Inside sellers. And I go to 7 geolocations around the world and I meet thousands of these sellers. When I get to Costa Rica, I meet Priscilla, and they're videotaping her. They want to know they want to bottle her. Okay, and you're like, well, what is she doing? What she's done is, so she's responsible for healthcare organizations and pharmaceutical companies from basically Mexico to Argentina, all of Latin America, and she's been assigned 100 premier accounts, and her responsibility is, as Challenger Sale would call it, like teach, tailor, and take control. What she's done from a tactical level is she's built a LinkedIn point drive. Every single week, she uploads new market insights and best practices and stack rankings and basically market trends on all of the industry or specific hospitals or pharmaceutical companies. And she has a distribution list of these 100 companies open to everybody, so everyone can share as an ecosystem. And every week she deploys this knowledge. She has 30% read and response rates every single week from these accounts. She has become their trusted, everybody uses this word trusted advisor, but she has become the market resource to these customers. Well, she was telling this story that 4 months into this process, she got sick and she couldn't go into work one week. And companies were emailing her on Monday asking for her. It's like the Barbara Corcoran reports when you've heard Barbara tell the story from Shark Tank. Like it became like a newsletter for the market. And that's influence.
That is influence. What a personal brand she's built for herself,
it's incredible.
Huh? Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Core competency number 3, to look for and identify A players as well as coaching your team, is assertiveness. Now, the trick here to assertiveness is, in my opinion, the right amount of assertiveness. So what does that look like? When you have too much, that means the rep might be arrogant, aggressive, or even insensitive. Your A players, your most talented professionals, are going to know the difference between being right and righteous. There's a difference. And it's important that you want to develop your teams to, it's okay to be assertive, but you have to be willing to confront your clients, the challenger sale method. You mentioned it just a minute ago. But remember to preserve the relationship. I think those are some of the key characteristics of an assertive behavior. You can ask questions to ask them how they've handled, behavior-based questions where they've handled situations where they had to advocate something that others in the room were against. I love hearing those stories, and I'd like to hear some more.
Yeah, and this is, of all of them, these are almost elements of strong EQ. So you're trying to smell for EQ in this situation. Less, the IQ of what books have you read and what data points do you know. You are truly looking for people that understand the art of push and pull. And so from an assertiveness standpoint, what I love, Paul is recognized as a seller. He needs a partner. So he's partnered internally with Rory. So this is teleperformance. So teleperformance, just so you know, as a business, basically every bank and insurance company and airline that uses an outsourced customer experience team, 250,000 employees at teleperformance, that's them. Okay, so around the world, we deploy a social selling and digital selling pipeline development program. I meet Paul in the UK and Rory in the UK. So not only is he assertive enough to find a partner internally, that's Rory, he leads a marketing team. Together, they build the single greatest account-based sales development program I have ever seen of the 300 global customers we've ever trained. Wow. They build this account-based sales development program that includes, they do deep in-store audits and assessments of certain customers. They do interviews of, imagine you're trying to win a bank or an airline. They're interviewing customers. They're filming and experiencing the walkthrough of what it's like to be in their environment. They started inventing associations for certain industries and inviting them to live events. What they've done is, again, without being cocky or arrogant or over the top, all that they're trying to do is say, hey guys, I'm going to build you a best-in-class nonprofit in EMEA for, let's say, the CX airline industry. And it took them a year or two, and they would throw these live events, and they would get people together, and they didn't have to push people to say, if you didn't join us, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a loser. It was, hey guys, I am building an ecosystem for you. Why don't you become part of this? And it is this, to learn from what they've done at Teleperformance, because their deals are like $10 million plus deals. To get to that level, you're going to have to build a program that really is assertive to helping people understand what best in class is without pushing them over the edge and making them feel belittled.
That's a great story of just the right amount of assertiveness, right? And in order to close $10 million programs like you just described, you have to be a thought leader. You have to be someone who's going to be assertive enough to challenge things, but at the same time, maintain the relationship, nurture the relationship while being challenging and a thought leader to your potential clients, right? All right. Attribute, core competency of A players, number 4, this, high energy. They have to be high energy. And you know why? The proof that they're high energy? Your top sales reps just simply out hustle everybody else. You know that they have more activities. You know they have more touches. You know that they're on the phone more. They're doing more demos and presentations and late night dinners and going to networking events. They just out hustle.
I've always loved this one because if anybody's ever done the online assessment tool of being a challenger, and I did it in 2012. I was super disappointed. I am not actually a challenger. I am, as Ben's talking about, the hard worker. I grew up a farm kid. In farm country, I could just outwork people but I didn't exude some of the other competencies. So I've always loved this one particular.
And you get stuff done, I bet, Jamie.
Oh,
you just get it done.
I log more miles. That's all I do.
So the attributes here are obvious: the hard worker, delivering demanding conditions. But I want to talk a little bit more about how. How do they out hustle? How do they have so much energy? One of the ideas I have here is that I find the ones with high energy, actually, they have a hobby. They have an avocation or side hustle or extracurricular activity. So in addition to out hustling in their day job, you're going to find that they're actually just as busy in their non-day job. And what that does, though, that's important, because A players need to balance and recreation. And what that does, though, is that actually renews their energy. So if they're doing something else while working, they actually get new energy. It's like recharging your battery so that when you go back into your day job, you're full of energy and you're ready to go. So that renewing of your energy levels are very high, and people with high energy know how to do that. The other thing that they understand is the importance of nutrition and rest and exercise. We all know it. When you're exercising in the mornings, especially, you just feel better the rest of the day. I think we all intuitively know that. And that's what high energy people, they already do it, and they do it in and out. So they have hobbies, they have side hustles and avocations, and they do that to recharge their batteries for their day job. We have an interview question here, but one thing I want to talk about when identifying high energy people, how do you identify them? Because people can come in and have a 20-ounce Starbucks and appear like they have high energy. But what I always do when I interview people, I always schedule interviews at the end of the day. I like to interview people at 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and because there is a little bit of different energy levels that you can read in people at that time of the day that might be different in a late morning 11 o'clock interview. So one little trick of the trade is I like to do interviews at the end of the day to help gauge their energy.
That's fantastic. And I was going to say, so read the book. There's a great one. Read the book Peak Performance, which it talks a lot about the greatest, the A players will build a plan for themselves around rest. And because I'll give you the example, what I've only recently in the last couple of years discovered about myself. I have found that, so I used to just work like 16, 18 hours. Like I literally worked 70-hour work weeks for 6 years in a row. And what I've discovered about myself is that everybody's body has kind of a rhythm, and mine's like a 90-minute cadence. And whenever I'm just staring at my laptop, or I don't feel like I am burning like afterburners, I'll just turn off my laptop, and for me, I go for hikes. So we have a cottage up north, northern outside of Toronto, Canada. I'll go for an hour-long hike, and I will come back, and what I will complete in the 10 minutes when I am back, because I have like my cognitive, open brainness, whatever you'd call that, is burning so high, I can get more done in that 10 minutes than I could in 2 to 3 hours. And so what I do is I'll rest, I'll for me, going for a hike or whatever, and I will come back and I will attack it. But I'm now only learning, the age of 40, the importance that rest as a balance to high energy makes the high energy possible. And if you go to the next slide, so we started working globally with the leader in the medical device industry, for the dental medical device industry, called Hugh Frady. I show up to their sales kickoff in South Carolina, and it's a beautiful place just outside of Charleston. And the CMO, Patrick, who's an amazing guy, he says, by the way, you're going to meet Spencer on our team. And Spencer is like the Tasmanian devil. He has just got more energy than you could imagine. And it's amazing. So I'm putting food in my mouth. We're at cocktail hour. And I could tell who he was. I'd never met him before. In a sea of hundreds of people, I could tell who he was, and he was 100 feet from me. And as he got closer, there was like energy coming off this guy. What's incredible, what he's done is he's translated that into a really productive process and a structured thinking. And so here's what he's doing. He's recognized the importance that his energy plays in his charisma with customers. So he's filming his experiences with customers. He's documenting them. He's whether it's at photos or videos, and he's using that as part of his social ecosystem. This is where I bring it back to the digital side. And he's sharing it socially so that other dentists, dental practices, dental universities can see that he's trying to create this ecosystem. But it's his energy that people want to be on camera with him. They want to take photos with him. And it's a great way. If you're an energetic, charismatic person, use that to your advantage and build an ecosystem around that, because people will be gravitated towards it. I think Spencer's done a great job of it.
Yeah, sometimes it's intangible. You just feel it.
Yeah.
All right. Last core competency, number 5. Very important. I think it's somewhat, this is the interesting thing about being attentive is it's somewhat low-hanging fruit. You can get started right away, but it's a lifelong process. You're never going to stop learning how to be attentive. So we know this is active listening skills, right? We've all heard the phrase, but how many times do we take a call from an SDR or an inside salesperson, or even go to a booth at a conference and the salesperson just wants to get to features and benefits and aren't really listening to what your needs are. But the A players don't do that. The A players listening to you and then match the partnership of what they can offer to help find a solution to your problems. That's what the attentive people do. So obviously they have excellent listening skills, but what does that mean? That means they attend fully when others speak. They're not thinking about the next thing they need to say. They're listening to understand. They also provide those verbal and nonverbal cues of interest. However, they don't do it where they're interrupting, where it can be annoying. I've had people do the the verbal cues, and they're kind of interrupting you along the way, which means they're not really listening. So you have to be careful with those verbal and nonverbal cues, but you still want to provide them at the appropriate times. And the other thing I find about attentive people and the active listening skills people is that they're very good in a succinct way of summarizing or paraphrasing the ideas of the conversation. So they're going to just, hey, let me make sure I understand and repeat back, or say, all right, in summary, here are the next steps, and repeat back what was told to them. They're very good at doing that. When identifying this trait or this skill set, one of the things I like to do throughout, periodically, I should say, in the interview, is I'll ask candidates to give me 3 examples of my question. So give you an example of such a question. I'll ask candidates, tell me, what are your 3 greatest accomplishments that you're most proud of? Well, that question actually covers 2 of these core competencies. It tells me if they're results oriented, but it also tells me if they're listening. A lot of times when I say, give me an example of 3 examples, the ones who aren't attentive will start with 1 or 2 examples, and then they get sidetracked and they don't give you a third. Or they get sidetracked altogether, and all of a sudden the conversation is going in another way that doesn't really answer the question. That brings up alarm bells to me that this person may need to work on their active listening skills. So did they get sidetracked when you asked them to give you 3 examples of something? Did they answer the question correctly? Did they summarize your question? Did they answer it succinctly? That's an active listener, and that's how I try to identify them in the interview process.
So Ben, to recap what you're saying, okay. So to give you a great example of this, if you flip to the next slide, this is one of my favorite examples of gathering customer feedback, listening to what's going on in the market. So meet Lars and Michel. So Michel runs all of enablement in EMEA for Rockwell Automation. Lars is running a team in the DACH region in Germany, and what they've done from being attentive and listening, what they started doing is they started doing sit downs with customers, or it's almost like those movies where you bring people into a room, the glass room, and you kind of interview them and see what they think. What they discovered is what's happening in the manufacturing or the industrial automation world. It's called Industrial Automation 4.0. Essentially, the digitization of the manufacturing environment. And they would just sit and listen and interview and sit and listen and interview. And what they eventually derived was that most manufacturers were living in a bubble. So you own a plant, a manufacturing plant somewhere in Cleveland or in outside of Munich, Germany, and you have no idea what's even going on in the next city or town or country. You work so hard inside your own business, you're just not gathering best practices. And so they became this group. They started inviting plant managers to local events. Okay, so imagine you were in Bavaria, in Germany, and you start bringing together all these manufacturers, and they would talk about the SWOT analysis, the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats of the future digitization of the manufacturing process. What is happening? How are we shaving costs? How are we going to compete with China? All these things. And they did it community by community, city by city. And one of their best account-based sales development strategies now is using digital online, whether they're using LinkedIn or Zing or WhatsApp. They're driving conversations online to move their accounts offline into physical events in geographic regions to meet these plant managers and talk about what's going on from one country to the next or one county to the next. And all it started with was just listening to and guess what? Exactly what Ben said. It's not always what they're saying, it's what they're not saying. What they recognized is it was what they plant managers weren't saying. They actually had no idea what was going on in this industrial revolution of data. And so they didn't say, I need more information on data. They didn't even know that they had that problem. They listened for the fact that clearly the customer had no idea that this was going on. So they brought forth these ideas.
So if you look at the opposite way, a lot of times I run into, we'll call it old industrial, and I'll talk about, hey, what channels of communication are you using? And you mentioned social media there, right? And social and to bring these groups together in person. And old industrial is like, oh no, these people don't go online, they don't have a profile, they don't go on LinkedIn. But by not listening, they were missing an opportunity to be innovative. And these people were listening to bring people together and actually be innovative and take an old industry like that and take them to best in class to build relationships.
Yeah, and they recognize that there's a difference between social and digital. And so social might mean that you're using a platform like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, in Germany like Zing. But being digital, they're using, guess what? People watch videos. People watch videos on their couch on their phone, right? So they were using digital technology, not just social, as a means of engaging them, but ultimately to move them to a human experience, which is face to face.
And it took listening to get them there.
Took listening to get them there.
That's amazing. Well, that's great. So those are the 5 core competencies I wanted to present to you today, Jamie. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, fantastic. So actually, we've got some questions. What we can do is I'll turn on the webcam and let me just try to pull them up. And let me see here. Let me get the webcam going. I'll fire you the first questions. Okay. So, the first question, it kind of wraps around, you and I talked a lot about Challenger a little bit. The question is, one of the challenges with Challenger essentially was when people saw that methodology or saw those ideas, they thought to themselves, well, that sounds great, but can I evolve my team to these competencies? Or do I need to pick up the team I have, throw them in the garbage, and go hire new ones that meet or exceed these competencies? So, Ben, you're moving people in and then developing them using these competencies. What would you do?
Yeah, is a great salesperson born, or can they be developed? And I think there's a little bit of both. Okay, some people do naturally have these 5 core competencies; they just do, and they're constantly developing them. But they can be developed as well. So I think, first of all, if you're an individual contributor and you're listening and watching this webinar, or if you're a manager and you want to manage your sales teams and develop these core competencies, there has to always be a thirst for knowledge. You have to always be learning. And I talked about active listening skills for the attentive person. That's something you never stop practicing. All the way until we're well into our retirement ages, we're still going to be practicing those active listening skills. So yes, that can be developed, and it can start immediately, and I think that can bring a big impact. I think developing hobbies, that hiking that you talked about, where you're bringing in natural light and breathing in fresh air to give you a 10-minute jolt when you get back, yes, that can be learned, absolutely. Monitoring immediate goals, right, toward long-term vision for the results-oriented people. Yeah, a lot of times the managers will come to you and say, all right, here's your monthly goals, go get them to hit our end-of-year number. But I think salespeople can be doing that for themselves. They don't need their manager to come in and do that to develop themselves, or learn that it's okay to challenge. A lot of times sales reps are passive, and as long as you're preserving that relationship, I think your clients and your partners actually want you to challenge them a little bit. So yes, those are all things that can be developed with your teams very quickly.
And if you were to start, okay, you were to stack rank the 5, either for the one that you would choose to select a person based on bringing them in, or you would concentrate on a development cycle, which of the 5 would you focus in on?
Yeah, I'd start with the active listening. I think that that's something that people can start practicing immediately. There's all sorts of content, training content on active listening. You can look that up in here and just start there today. I also think the results-oriented piece, monitoring immediate results toward long-term objectives, that's something that can be implemented pretty quickly. So I'm not going to stack rank them, because I think all 5 integrate really well together. But I still don't want to avoid your question. I want to answer your question by saying, let's start with active listening and results-oriented monitoring, because I think those are things that you can get the ball rolling pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I would agree that the energetic piece is more, again, unless I'm going to pump them full of cappuccinos, there's only so many solutions there. You were either born excited or you're born boring. It's one of the two, I guess. But maybe you can help people learn like better diet and exercise and sleep. I guess those are learned traits, but energy and excitement and passion only, you either have. I'm more of a believer you either have it or you don't. I guess last question before we wrap up. You've got multiple disciplines and functions of sellers: inside sales, field sales, channel sales, account executives for customer success. Can all of this be applied? Again, if you took a competency and you fitted it into a silo, is there somewhere you might start? Where can you make a biggest impact? Where are you doing a lot of your hiring? And maybe that'll help people understand where you're focusing on certain roles.
Yeah, that's a great question. These are general enough that they can be used in all disciplines, all sales functions, all verticals, all industries. I truly believe that. A lot of times industries get stuck, kind of like what you're talking about with the old industries that you were talking about earlier. They get stuck with just norms that they've developed over decades. But no, these core competencies transfer to B2B, B2C, inside sales reps and SDRs, outside sales reps, direct and indirect and channel partners. They're absolutely transferable to those. Again, we have a robust recruiting engine here. We actively look for passive job seekers. We're not waiting for job seekers to come in. We're very much into referrals, and we ask our A players to bring us some friends and family that they have in their network, because referrals are a great way to go. So we do a lot of hiring from referrals. But it's all walks of life. I've said it before. Like, you could have someone from industry experience, and a lot of times they're going to bring that bad training that your competitor, you want to be different than your competitor. Why do you want to be the same and bring that person in? So you just never know. I think initially you have a broad net, and you're just looking for these 5 core competencies, and they can come from anywhere. They can come from someone with a degree or without a degree. They can come from someone with military experience. They can come from, like I said, one of my favorite sellers was a guy who was an inner city Chicago school teacher, grew up in the inner city, and just thought his way of giving back to the community, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a teacher. He tried it for a couple of years, he didn't like it, and it just was a mismatch. And I do think teaching is something that you're kind of passionate about and that you're almost called to. And he wasn't sure, are my students really progressing? And he didn't have that. I interviewed this guy who had no sales experience, and I said, man, he checks the box on all 5 of these. Hired him. He immediately became an A player. We developed him to become a leader. And, next thing you know, he went from 35 grand a year to making 6 figures in just a few years. And it was all because I took a chance on a guy who was an inner city school teacher. I think it's all walks of life, and you just need to probe for these 5 core competencies.
That is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to leave it there. In fact, I got my very first sales job because somebody took a risk on me. I had worked on the stock market and the stock exchange, did my MBA, came back, 0 sales experience. And I physically begged my way into a job. I kind of like snuck into the office, went to the CEO's door, opened the door, and just pleaded, like, give me a job. But similar, Ben, somebody took a flyer on me. I wouldn't be a sales guy if it wasn't for that person. So that's fantastic. So we're going to leave it there, everybody. We're going to wrap up. Thank you, Ben. Fantastic webinar. The recording's going out in 24 hours. And please use Ben and I as a resource. Ben talking about competency and recruiting, us about digital and selling, digital and social best practices, particularly on pipeline development. Looking forward to the next one. You take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.